All right, well, hello everyone. Thank you for taking the time to join today's webinar. My name is Arun. I am a customer success manager here at SciNote's, and I'm joined by my wonderful colleague, Ava.
Hi everyone. So I will be here taking questions throughout the webinar. Whatever I will not be able to answer during the webinar, we will try to answer everything at the end. If that's not possible because we run out of time, we will make sure that we answer, we follow up after the webinar.
Perfect. Thank you, Ava. And yes, please use the Q&A section in the Zoom toolbar to drop any questions along the way. All right, with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. As many of you know, the topic of today's webinar is unlocking the potential or maximizing the potential of your SciNote inventories. So we've created a few different use cases of how you could potentially use SciNote's inventory system as part of your lab or organization's workflow to help enhance your overall usage of SciNote. So with that being said, we'll jump right in to our inventory section here. So the first use case I'd like to go over is using the SciNote inventories for total instrument management of your lab. Now, this includes management of instrument usage, instrument maintenance, instrument calibrations, and basically maintaining instruments in your lab and making sure everyone has visibility into the status of all instruments in the lab. So as you can see here, I've created an inventory called instrument management. So we'll go ahead and jump into that inventory here. And now I'm going to give you an overview of what information I've captured in this inventory that I've created. Quick disclaimer, you may choose to capture more information at a more detailed level, or you may choose to keep it a little bit more brief. That's entirely up to you. Of course, if you have any questions or need any recommendations, you can always reach out to us or your CSM, and we can guide you in how best to create the inventory for your specific use case. So here in this inventory that I've created, I have 8 lab instruments. We have a few PCR machines, we have some liquid handlers, we have some gravimetric scales. So all of that is captured under the name column. And then we have a column for instrument availability. So as you can see, some instruments are available for use, some of them are reserved. We have one under maintenance and one is unavailable because it's out of calibration. Now, the column type that I use for this is column type status, but you could also use a dropdown or a checklist if you wanted to. And the column to the right of that is reserved by. So this indicates who reserved each of these instruments that are reserved here. So this is useful because you can create a dropdown of all the individuals in your lab. And so whenever they want to reserve an instrument, they can come in here, update the availability to reserved, change the reserved by to their name, and then you'll know who to reach out to find out when the instrument will be available, or if you urgently need the instrument, you can go directly talk to that person. And then we have the location of each instrument. Once again, this is a status column type with a dropdown of each location for all the instruments. And then for the next 2 columns, we have calibration dates. So the first one is last calibration date. This indicates when the last calibration was performed for each of these instruments. And then we have the next calibration date. So this indicates when is the next calibration due for this instrument. Now, these 2 columns are important because with the calibration date, particularly the next calibration date, you can actually set a date reminder. So for example, if I go to manage columns, go to my next calibration date, I'll just edit this column here. You can see that I've selected the reminder option here and set the threshold for 7 days. So once we're within 7 days of when the calibration date is due, you'll get a reminder in SciNote, and the reminder will look like this. You'll see a small red dot here under the calibration date, and you'll also get an alert bell here that when you click will tell you the date reminder has kicked in. And to the right here, we have a column type for file. In this case, I've used it to capture any user manuals or troubleshooting guides for our lab instruments here. So this way, when a user is assigning an instrument to be used in a task, at the point of assigning the instrument, they can directly access the user manual or troubleshooting guide for that particular instrument. So this saves them time having to look for it elsewhere because you know it's all available here in your instrument management inventory. All right, next up, we have calibration details. So in this column here, what I've done is captured which project in SciNote is tracking all the instrument calibrations. So now let me open this and I'll walk you through how I've set this up. All right, let's take a step back first to projects. So here I've created a project in SciNote called Instrument Management with the goal of tracking calibrations, maintenance for all of my lab instruments within this one project. And when I open this project, you'll see a few different experiments that I've created. And each experiment corresponds to a specific instrument that I have in my lab. So as an example, let's take a look at our Biorad ddPCR instrument here. So if I open the experiment, you'll see we have a few tasks here. In this case, each task corresponds to a specific calibration date. Now, in my example here, each calibration occurs in a space of 30 days. We have February, March, April, June, July. And as you can also see here, for the March calibration, there was a deviation in the protocol. So I've just created a new task, repeated the same calibration, marked it as a deviation, and also connected it to which calibration date the deviation occurred in. And the nice thing about using the tasks to track your calibration, every time you need to create a new calibration task, you can just duplicate an existing task, and all the protocol steps get copied over. So all you have to do is open the task, assign the instrument that's being calibrated, complete the protocol steps, upload your results. And if you need to sign off on the task, you can send it out for signature approval and then mark it as done. So let's take a look at one of our experiments here. Okay, so I have a calibration here that's in progress for May 15th. So a typical workflow for calibration within a task would look like this. So first thing, if you want to, you can create an inventory for reagents that you're going to be using to calibrate this particular instrument. In this case, I have a positive control and a negative control for this PCR instrument. And then, of course, I've also assigned the instrument itself that's being calibrated. And then we have the actual calibration steps. And when you copy the protocol over as a template, all these steps get copied over. The assigned items do not get copied over, but the steps will. And as each step is completed, you can mark it as complete. This gets captured in the activity log and the audit trail as well. So you'll know when exactly each step was completed. And then with the final step completed, we can move on to our results here. Now with calibration results, there's a few different things you can do. You can just add a text box and type out that the calibration is complete, no issues were seen. And if you even need to, you can upload the calibration log. So I know in some cases, you can export the calibration logs from an instrument, either as an Excel file, a text file, or a CSV. Even if it's a proprietary file type, you can still upload it to SciNote, and it will be attached to this particular calibration task. Or alternatively, if you have a calibration form that needs to be filled out by the person that's completing the calibration, you can upload that form to the results section here. And because of our Microsoft Office integration, the file can be filled out in real time here. So for example, you can input all the relevant information and all the changes will be saved to this attached file here within this task. Now, if the file is attached to the results section, whenever you copy the task as a template, it doesn't get copied over because, as I mentioned earlier, only content within the protocol steps will get copied over. But a simple workaround to that is just to have this file attached as a protocol step, maybe as the final step in this section here. Sorry, give me a moment to load it. Yep, so you can just add a final step here and attach the calibration form that needs to be filled out. So that way, whenever you duplicate this task as a template, that attachment gets copied over as well. All right, so now that we've completed each calibration step, we've uploaded our results. Let's say you require signature approval for the calibration, so you can have someone review it. We can go up to the status here, say move to completed. And then from here, we're going to take it to in review, at which point the task will get locked. And now in a moment here, we'll be able to request signatures. So now when I click on sign task, so we have my name here since I was assigned this task and I'm the owner of this task, but I can request additional signatures. For this project, I'm the only one on this project, but if you have someone in a supervisory role or a quality role, you can add them to this instrument management project that we created. And at that point, you'll be able to request their signature as well. But once I sign off on it, see here. And now I can move it to done. So now when we go back to this experiment, we can see that the calibration for May is done, which implies it's also been signed off on. Now, the other nice thing about using projects, experiments, and tasks to track your calibration is you can easily generate calibration reports. So let's say at the end of the year, you want to generate a report of all the calibrations that were done for this Bio-Rad instrument here. We can just go to reports, say new report, give it a name. So we'll have to select the project from which the report data is going to come from. So we know that's instrument management. We only have one default template to use. Say continue. And then now it's going to open up all the experiments within the instrument management project. But of course, we're not interested in all of them. We're only interested in the Bio-Rad here. And even here, if you only wanted to include the calibration from a particular month or specific months, you can uncheck the ones you don't want. But in this case, since we're doing it for the entire year, hypothetically, we'll select all the calibration tasks. And then now if I scroll down, say continue, it's going to ask us from the task, do you want to include the protocol steps? Yes, we do, because we want to see what the calibration protocol was. But if you don't, you can just uncheck this and include results only. And then for assigned items, we do want to see the calibration reagents that were used and the instrument that was used, which in this case is the instrument being calibrated. So I leave this checked. In the assigned items, it does list all the inventories available to you in SciNote, but it will only include items from inventories that you have assigned in this particular task. And then for results, we do want to include all results. And if you have any attachments, if they're in the form of a PDF or a docx, if you select insert pages, it will merge the actual content of those files with the report that's generated. Otherwise, there will be a link that's included in the report, which when you click will download the actual attachment for you to review. And then we have task activity and electronic signatures. If you include the task activity, you'll see timestamped data of when each step in the protocol was performed. But fair warning here, it's going to add a few additional pages because it's very, very detailed. So in this case, I won't include it, but I do want to include the electronic signatures so you can see what that looks like. So once we have all this information, say start generating. Takes a few seconds to generate the report. And once it's done generating, you'll get an email as well notifying you that the report has been generated. So now let's take a look at what this report actually looks like. So let me zoom in a little bit. Okay, so we have the name of the project, which is instrument management, followed by the name of the experiment. In this case, since we named the experiment the name of the instrument that's being calibrated, we have that up here. And then we have the name of the task, which I've chosen to name as calibration, the SOP or protocol number, and the date that the task is being performed. We also know that task status is done, and it was completed on this date at this time. We have the name of the protocol, and now we have each protocol step, also with the confirmation that the step was completed, and a quick timestamp here on which date and time it was completed as well. And of course, each protocol step that was there. And then for results, we uploaded a calibration log. So as I mentioned earlier, you can download this actual file. I can't click on it because I'm opening a preview of this, but if I downloaded the PDF and clicked on it, it would download this actual attachment. And then on the next page, we have a preview of the attachment. And once again, this calibration form that I added, you can download it. If you download the actual PDF and click on it, you can download it. Or since this is actually a Word doc, if you chose insert into report, it will actually insert these pages towards the end of the report here. And then lastly, we have the inventory items that were used. So we selected the positive control, negative control from the reagent inventory. And then of course, the instrument itself that was used for the calibration. And on the last page here, we have electronic signature, which was mine, signed on this date and time. And of course, these tasks didn't have the signature since I only signed off on the one task. And with the report, it does generate it as a PDF, but you can also generate it as a docx file, which is a Word document. So that way, if you need to make any minor changes to the formatting or any of the content, you can do that as needed. And lastly, once the report has been generated, if you click on the report option here, there is a nice option to save it directly to an inventory. So if you want to create an inventory or have a column in the instrument management inventory to track all the calibration reports, you can do that. And every time a report is generated, you can save it directly to the inventory as well. All right, so that's everything on the instrument management inventory.
Before you go on to the next use case, you might be an expert on this. So we have two questions from Therese. The first one is, can the availability column be something like uptime status? And then how do you make a BOM?
Sure. So for uptime status, I'm assuming that means how, I guess, how long the instrument is going to be reserved. We have a column for, let's see, let's add a new column here, call it uptime status. So instead of, you could do date and time or just track time if you wanted to. And then save the column. So whoever is reserving the instrument, so in this case, let's take a look at this ddPCR instrument. If you know when the instrument is going to be available again, you can definitely mention that here. So let's say I'm using it for a week. I can say it'll be available next week. So now we have uptime status. So that way, if someone else is looking to use this instrument, they know it'll be available in a week here. And before I move on to the next question, I quickly want to mention calibration summary here. So we tracked all the detailed calibration information as individual tasks within the instrument management project. However, for each instrument, if you do want a high-level summary of the calibration, you can have a column here as a column type file, create an Excel file. And so it could be just a very brief calibration table saying the date of calibration, the technician, the protocol that was followed, and the task sign-off. So that way, you know at a high level what's happening with the calibration. And of course, if you want the detailed information, you would jump into each experiment here. And sorry, one more thing I wanted to mention here. If you do want to track your calibration information outside of SciNote for some reason, let's say as a Google spreadsheet or as a Dropbox or Box file, you can paste a direct link to it as well. So that way you can open this link and then update the calibration information as needed there. I think the next question was, how do you create a BOM or a bill of materials? So I'm guessing the question came from this few inventories that I have here labeled as BOM. A quick disclaimer, so SciNote's inventories weren't built for purpose to be used as a bill of material management system, but you can repurpose it for that. So in this case, I have a master BOM here with a few of the assemblies or components, and then I'm tracking the subassembly information as well in either in a different inventory or in an individual experiment or task. And I'm also tracking the design file, the design owner, and the status. So with the bill of materials, at the moment, it is hard to link assemblies to subassemblies or even individual components because we don't have the ability to link two items across two inventories in SciNote. Now, that being said, later this year, we do have a planned release for what we're calling a parent-child relationship between inventory items. So you can take an inventory item and link it to a sub-item, which would be a subsample, an aliquot, or in this case, a subassembly. So once that feature is available, it might make it a little bit easier to use inventories for bill of materials. So please stay tuned for that. And I will reach out to you personally once that feature is available so we can explore that in a little bit more detail. Now, moving on to the next use case I have here, which is just standard tracking of your consumables, reagents, supplies, etc. So in this inventory here called R&D supplies, I'm not tracking too much information, but of course, as I mentioned earlier, you can get as detailed as you want. You can create as many columns as you want for the inventories. But in this case, I'm pretty much tracking the name of the item, the expiration date, the lot number. If I want to include a vendor link, I can. And of course, the stock column here. And I have a column here for the SDS file. So if you have any hazardous reagents, you can include the safety data sheet as well. Now, the most interesting or useful aspect of this reagent tracking here is the stock column here. So the stock column, which is available with the stock management add-on, allows you to automate the tracking of consumption of each inventory item or items. So you can set the starting stock when you purchase an item or add it to your inventory here. And every time the item is used in a particular task that is part of an experiment or a project, whoever is completing the task can mention how much volume or how much stock or quantity of that item they are consuming. And the inventory will update automatically based on how much is consumed to reflect how much of that particular item is left. And you can also track how much of a particular item was consumed over time in the audit trail at the moment. And of course, for the future, we do have a feature planned that will allow you to see a usage summary of a particular item or items, so you can see how much of that item you've used within a period of 6 months or within a particular project, or within different other conditions as well. And to see where each item is used, we do have an assigned column here. So you can see there are different numbers for each of these inventory items. So if I were to click on the number, it will tell me which project, which experiment, and which task this particular item has been used in. And if it's used in quite a few tasks here, you can also filter down by searching. So for example, if I search for a keyword here, I can narrow it down to a specific project or even a task. And then I can directly navigate to that task from here. So you can see under R&D supplies, we've added these items here. And to also show you how to consume items, I'll add a few more items here. So one other important thing to note is when you are assigning items to a task, any relevant or important information about the item is also available to you here, such as the expiration date alert. So you'll see the red dot appearing here. You also have a low stock alert here, as well as this bell here that tells you you're running low on this item. And also this item is expiring in 7 days. So you're aware before you actually use the item that it's going to expire soon, or it might expire, or it's already expired. So now let's jump back to our task here. Oh, sorry, let me refresh. All right, sorry, let me try with a different task. Okay, so I'll come back here, assign R&D supplies. Pick a handful of items here. So now that these items have been assigned, you can consume them directly from the task itself. So I say consume, enter the amount that I'll be consuming. So as you can see, it's going to update the remaining stock automatically. And if we were to go back to our inventory for R&D supplies, you can see that the stock has been updated here. And once again, if you need to find which task each item is used in, you can click here and quickly find that information as well. Now, the next use case I'd like to go over is tracking samples. Now, this could be samples that you receive from external clients that you're processing in your lab, or even internal samples that you are processing within your lab for testing or experimental purposes. So we have a sample tracking inventory. And here, the information that I'm capturing is slightly different. So in this use case, these samples are being processed for an external client. So for the sample name, I have a client code as well as a sample code. I have the client name. For status, I'm tracking whether it's complete, is it in progress, it's pending, or if it needs to be repeated. And then I'm also tracking the number of aliquots remaining. So for this, I'm using the stock management column once again. So at each task where this sample is being tested or processed, I'm assigning an aliquot and consuming either 1 or 2 units of the aliquot, depending on how many times I had to run the test or what test was being run. And then you can also see how many aliquots you have left in case you need to be wary of how much you're using, or in case you need to create more aliquots. And to see how the aliquots were created or what protocol was followed to create the aliquots, I've created a separate project here called sample aliquots, and I've linked that project directly to these items here. So if I open this project here, you can see I've created a sample aliquots project, and my experiment is specific to the client from who these samples came. And then if I open this, I can show you the task here where it has the first aliquot batch generated on April 20th. And of course, if you generated a second batch, you could have a second task. And once again, you can duplicate the task as a template. So your protocol steps will be copied over, saving you a lot of time and effort there. So coming back to our inventory here. Now, this project here was to show you the information about how the aliquots are generated. But to see the actual tasks or experiments where these samples were processed or tested, once again, that information is going to be under the assigned column here. So if I click on this number here, you can see that I have a sample processing project, experiment with the client name, and then also sample aliquots project. So now this sample was used to generate aliquots, but it was also used in the actual sample processing. So if I open the sample processing task here, you can see that I've assigned all these samples here from the sample tracking inventory that we were just looking at. And then I also consumed 3 units of each of, or 2 units, 4 units, 1 unit of each of these respective samples. And immediately the stock management feature updates how many aliquots of each of these samples are remaining. So it's useful for you or even your entire team to have a high-level overview of how many aliquots are being used, how many are left. So that way you can carefully plan if you need to generate more aliquots or be more careful or wary of the aliquots that you're using in case you're running out. All right, now coming back to our inventories here. The next use case I'd like to take a look at is a little bit more creative or different than some of the previous use cases that we've looked at. And in this case, I'm using the inventory to track resources in the lab or resource management. So I have an inventory here called resource management. So in this inventory, you can see I have the different lab resources in this particular lab that I'm working in. I'm also tracking the statement of work hours remaining. Now, this could be contract hours, scope of work. If you're working on projects for external clients, or even internally, if you want to track where resource hours are being used, you can use the stock management column here once again. So I set the starting stock as how many hours were budgeted for each particular project. So let's say we start at 100 hours for each resource. Then if you look at the assigned column here, you can see where each of these resources were used, which projects or which tasks. And in each of these tasks, as I'm assigning the resource or as the resource is assigning themselves, they will consume 2 hours or 3 hours, depending on how many hours they spent on the task. And then the stock management feature updates how many hours are remaining per the budget. And as you can see here for Audrey, we've gone beyond the budgeted hours, which is why we have -3 hours here. And I also have a column here to track the different project codes. You can do this as a dropdown if each resource is only going to be working on one project. I've opted for a checklist here because some of the resources are working on multiple projects, as you can see here. We have 3 different project codes. And then in the last column, I'm tracking a more detailed usage summary. So this could be like a weekly summary, a yearly summary for each resource, indicating on which days, how many hours they spent on each project. So this will be a more granular breakdown of your resource usage, whereas this inventory as a whole gives you a high-level overview of where the resources are being used, and of course, if we've exceeded the budgeted hours for any particular resource in this case. Now, along the same lines as resource management, you can use the inventories in SciNote for project management as well. So I'm going to quickly switch teams. And we'll take a look at this inventory here called Project Overview. So we have quite a few columns here. This particular inventory was created to manage multiple projects, either within an academic lab or even within an industrial organization. If you have multiple projects going on with different project leads or project managers, you can track all of that information here in a SciNote inventory. So for example, we have the name of the project. We have the name of the project lead. We have the study phase. Is it completed? Is it still in the early stages? Are we generating the report? And once again, each of these columns are customizable. So you can have a dropdown of different study phases depending on what study phases you've defined as part of your project. And then we also have the estimated completion date, the current due date, and then which researchers or which resources have been assigned to this particular project. So if I click here under researchers assigned, you can see we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different researchers assigned. Whereas for some of these other projects, there's only 2 people that have been assigned. And then of course, project status. Down here, you can see this project is ready for the project manager or project lead. And if they are a SciNote user, you can tag them in SciNote and they'll get a notification. And then the last column here we have is the project budget. And once again, we're using the stock management feature to track this one over here. So the way we've set this up here is we've set the initial budget that was budgeted for this project. So let's say in this example, $5,000. Now, as each task is completed, you can use the stock management feature to consume a certain amount of the budget. And as you get close to your low budget threshold, you'll see a warning here and also the alert bell here telling you that you're nearing the threshold for the reminder that you set. And of course, if you receive additional funding, you can just add, in this case, let's say we got $500 more of budget here. We can update that information as well. And then coming back to the inventories here. Another use case for the SciNote inventories is also to use it for training purposes. So in this case, we have an inventory here called training record. So in this inventory, we have different lab users as inventory items. And then what we're tracking here is their training on specific skills or techniques within the lab. As you can see, we have handling of dry boxes, the Carl Fisher titrations, handling of sharp objects. And then we have trained by dates. So if someone needs to be trained by a particular date, you can use a date column to set that date and even set a reminder so that the reminder will kick in if someone hasn't been trained yet. And then we can track the status of each individual's training. So if the training status is active, if they're currently in training, or if it's inactive and they need to be retrained, that is also available here. And then we're also tracking the number of checks. So this is after they've been trained, they're going to go through a training check to see that, or to evaluate how well they know the particular training process or procedure. And that's tracked here as checks. And then the checks remaining, once again, is using the stock management feature. So you can set the threshold as 3 checks need to be passed before the training will be active. So as you can see here, once we're down to 0 checks, you know that this particular user has completed all the required checks for this particular skill, and their training status can be marked as active now. All right. I think that's all the information that I wanted to cover in terms of use cases. So we can move on to questions, Eva.
So we have a short one, and it's what sort of column is in the SOW hours remaining?
Great question. So let's jump over to that inventory. So that was in my resource management inventory. So statement of work hours remaining. So to see what type of particular column is, or to adjust column types, all of that is going to be possible through the Manage Columns button here. So when you click on that, find the column you're looking for, and this right here will tell you what column type it is. In this case, I've used the column type stock, which is available using the stock management feature. And to show you a little bit more detail of what that looks like. So I've named the column here. I've assigned it column type stock. And then if you need to create your own units, in this case, I did create the unit hours since that wasn't available before. But if you want to track budget, you could have dollars here. You could have days. So it's very customizable in terms of what unit you'd like to track. And once the column type is set, you can set the initial. Actually, let me just show you. So we'll create a new item. We'll add vid to our project. So now, since we've added a new resource, we're going to set stock, which in this case is the initial budgeted statement of work hours. So let's say for this project, we've budgeted 50 hours of vid's time. If you want to create a low stock reminder, we can say remind us once we're down to 5 hours of vid's time left. So now we have the starting stock of 50. So now every time vid is assigned to a particular task or project, he will, when he's completing the task, he'll select the inventory resource management, assign himself to that particular task as an inventory item or a resource, and then there'll be an option to consume. So he'll consume, if he spent 10 hours on the task, he would consume 10 hours on that task, and then so on and so forth with each task. And every time he consumes hours at the task, this column here gets updated automatically with how many hours are left.
All right, and now we have a more complex question.
All right. How do you manage reagents when you have multiple bottles, but only one is open and therefore may have a shorter expiration period than the rest of the lot of that same material? So we have multiple bottles of the same reagent, but only one is open. So in this case, what you would do is, the way I would set it up is setting each bottle as an individual or independent inventory item. And then you can set a date for open date. So that way, the day that the bottle is open, or whichever bottle is open, you can set that date. And then if the bottle expires from the open date or 30 days from the open date, you can set the expiration date accordingly, and then set a reminder to let you know within 5 days or 10 days of the expiration date approaching. If you need some additional help with this, please go ahead and email us or email your CSM, and then we can help you set it up more tailored to your specific use case that you have.
I don't see any other question for now. We have answered everything.
Well, we still have a little bit more time, so if any other questions come in. If not, I'll take the time to go over a couple more things. So one of the features of the inventory that I want to go over, parent-child option. Okay, sorry, we just had a question come in. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the parent-child option? So as I mentioned earlier, this particular feature hasn't been released yet. It is planned for release later this year. And what it will allow you to do is if you have a parent sample and you're creating aliquots or subsamples from that parent sample, you can add the child sample or subsample to an inventory and link it to the parent sample. So you'll know where the aliquot or subsample came from. Now, because I don't have the feature to show you, this is the best explanation I can come up verbally, but if you have additional questions, please email me directly or email your CSM, and I can explain it to you in further detail or answer more specific questions regarding the parent-child relationship.
Now, there are two other quite simple questions. Maybe I can just respond. The first one is, how do I become a team owner? This is a question related to a previous one where this user cannot create an inventory. So if you don't have the option to create an inventory, this is because of your role within the team. Only a team owner can create and let's say manage an inventory. So if you wish to have that, let's say, privilege within your SciNote, you need to talk to your organization admin, because that's also a decision that you should make at a team level. So it's an internal decision that you should discuss with your colleagues. So organization admin can help you becoming a team owner. And then the other question is from Sitara, and you're asking how does the stock management add-on trial work and how you can access it. So we enabled this add-on already on all the instances. So maybe Arun, you can just show. You just need to check basically.
So let me just create a new inventory here. So if you want to check whether you have the trial enabled, so either create a new inventory or open an existing inventory that you have, and then click on Manage Columns here. Then click on Add Column. And under column type, if you scroll down, there will be a column type called Stock. If this is available to you, that means the trial is active for you and you can use the stock management trial. If this isn't available and you don't see it, please reach out to us right away and we can take a look at why it's not enabled, and we can go ahead and enable the free trial for you. And if you have questions on how to use it, please reach out to us. We have a lot of material and videos to share on how to use it. And of course, your CSM or one of the CSMs from our team can help you out as well.
Yeah, and then we have one other question from Manka. You want to know if you can import an inventory from an existing Excel. Yes, you can.
Yes, you can. So let's see here. Let me open a good example that I have. All right, we'll stick with the instrument management. Actually, let's go with troubleshooting inventory that I have. So there's a button here that says import items. So you can click on this button, choose a file. I'm just going to pick an Excel file that I have here. And then say upload. But now a few important things to pay attention to. Before you upload items from an Excel file, there's two things you want to do. The first is set up your column headers in SciNote. So you want to understand what columns you have in Excel and make sure you have those respective column headers in SciNote, because at the point of importing here, it's going to ask you to map which Excel column is going to be mapped to which respective SciNote columns. So that way the data in that column in Excel will be populated in the column that you map in SciNote. So for example, here, it's not going to match because I didn't pick or I didn't create the same columns as what's there in the file. But you'll click this drop down here, find the mapped column. So in this case, if you want the column item, you'll click here, find item. Here, freezer number, you would click here, select freezer number. For rack, you would click here and select rack. And then once you've mapped all the columns with the column headers in Excel, you can click import, and then all your items will be imported. If you run into any issues or if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to email us and we can help you out further with that.
Okay, I think we can take this last question from
Sure.
Clarice. Clarice, thanks for asking so many good questions. Yeah, so I'll let you probably read them.
Can you permanently assign an inventory list to a protocol where when you load a new protocol, the materials will automatically show up for consumption? Great question. This is a question that we do get quite often. So when you duplicate a task as a template or even load a protocol from the protocol templates, the only information that gets transferred over is the information in the protocol steps. Unfortunately, inventory items don't get copied over, and this is by design because if an item is expired, we don't want that being copied over automatically and being used accidentally, which is why we force you to pick the inventory, look at the item information, and then manually assign the items so you don't accidentally assign an item that is expired or that came from a batch that was contaminated or anything like that. So it's by design to kind of act as a fail-safe when you're assigning items.
This is a doubt that I also have. So will you be sending the recording after, or shall we collect the emails of who's interested in receiving it?
So I can share the recording after. I wouldn't want to spam everyone that registered for the webinar, but if you're interested in receiving a recording of the email, please email premiumsupport@SciNote.net. Or in this case, if you posted your name here, we'll email you a recording of the webinar as well.
Yeah, probably if you just also type your email here, then for us it's also faster and we can just send the recording to you. And then because we only have 4 minutes left, I wanted to share the link to the survey, but I can't, I will be very honest. I don't think that.
Okay.
So maybe you should do it. And while Arun is sharing with you the link for the survey, I wanted to point out that if you submit, so everyone who will submit the survey today, you will receive a 10% discount if you decide to go on and purchase the stock management add-on. So you now have the link to the survey in the chat. I'm just gonna have a last. Okay, there are no questions, but thank you for sending the emails. And thank you for asking so many great questions today.
Yes, and please do respond to the survey. We have an option for you to include additional topics that you'd like to see in future webinars. So please feel free to add as many topics that you think would be useful, and we'll do our best to create more webinars such as this one, depending on the topics that you request. And of course, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to us at premiumsupport@SciNote.net, and our team will be happy to help you. Thank you so much, everyone, for taking the time to attend today. Really appreciate your presence here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.